Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brody Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by JP Box, author of The Millennial Lawyer. JP, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, Paul. I appreciate it.
Are you ready to get started?
Yes, I am. Let's do it.
All right, question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
That's a good question. I would say to do everything he or she can do to make the writing process as easy as possible. And what I mean by that, when I was writing my book, I would say for every 1 hour I spent writing, I probably spent about 5 hours researching and organizing my thoughts. So, my book covers millennials in the law and what law firms can do to connect with a challenging generation. And so I spent a lot of time researching, looking at academic studies, looking at consulting studies. And as themes started to come through, I kind of created a master outline of different chapters I wanted to cover, main points I wanted to cover, and really fleshed that out so that at the point where I got to writing, the writing was more or less connecting the dots. And I think, a mistake I've made in the past, and I think a lot of us do, is wanting to get to the writing portion so badly that we shortchange the pre-writing process. And so, from my perspective, if you've done the pre-writing process well, you've done your research, you've organized your thoughts, you know what you want to say in the order you want to say it in, then fingers crossed, the writing itself should be the easiest part of what you're actually doing.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
The hardest part about getting published is being optimistic in the face of people telling you no. There are very few people who have, the red carpet rolled out for them to publish, certainly their first book. And so you have to be resilient, whether you're writing a book, whether you're starting a business, which I have. There's going to be kind of three main pieces of advice you will hear. One is encouragement, one is challenging, and one is doubt. And it's important to kind of take on those three buckets of advice from friends, from family, from colleagues. But at some point, you have to have the courage in your own vision for what you're trying to accomplish, what you want to write about, and be prepared to, really see, you have a clear idea. I'm going to go from point A to point B, but very quickly, I think most of us find out we have to be creative about how we get there. And so just to share kind of, how I got The Millennial Lawyer published, my first thought was, I wanted to start advising law firms what they can do to connect with this young generation of attorneys. And so I wanted to host a continuing education seminar. Lawyers are required to do, a certain number of those every year. But I got pretty much crickets from the education boards trying to make this happen. And so my next path was, well, I'm going to start, writing about this in legal periodicals. And someone from the American Bar Association, the National Bar Association, saw one of my articles, and that was the genesis to start exploring the book. But like so many things, if, the first path you go down, if you find that it's not receptive to you or to your idea, be creative about what paths you keep going down, because, the first door usually isn't open, but if you continue with, the courage of your own conviction, you continue with your vision, you may be surprised at what doors ultimately do open.
Yeah, it's a great point with that. Well, let's talk about marketing a little bit. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that worked well.
The most effective strategy for me has been writing about the book. writing articles in different legal magazines, legal blogs, doing interviews. There's more opportunity out there than ever before to get your voice heard, but there's also more noise as well. And so, when a book launches and your publisher does the press release and pushes it forward at the launch date, I feel like there's less, those things mean less than they used to, just because people do move on to the new thing so quickly on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever. And so being tenacious about getting your name out there, getting your book out there multiple times, and maybe the first time they saw your name, it didn't click, but they see it a second and a third and a fourth time, and slowly it kind of breaks through all the noise that's out there, and that kind of can gain some traction. It's sometimes challenging to write a similar type article a dozen times, and I want to make each thing I write, I want it to be new, I want it to be fresh, but you're still going after the same main points. But I really feel that if you can get your name out there as much as possible, get in front of people as often as possible, eventually that name recognition starts to click and you break through all the noise that's out there.
So how many exposures, so to speak, do you feel are needed to be able to make this impact?
That's a good question. I would say at least maybe 10 or so. And then also, being very active with different community groups that, would be interested in your topic. So, I'm a member of the DC Bar Association, the Colorado Bar Association, the American Bar Association. And so going to events where people will, you'll get a chance to meet people will start hearing your story. But I think it really has to be, multiple times telling your story, doing your elevator pitch, writing about your book, to really start connecting and have it be something that people will begin talking about.
So you're talking more at these type of events like networking and doing the elevator pitch like that versus potentially speaking at the events, like doing speeches. Is that what you're referring to?
I would say both.
Okay.
So I've definitely done both. And people are always excited for content. So whether it's a magazine or whether it's an opportunity to speak in front of a bar association group, for me, for example, people are always looking for interesting content. And particularly if you're writing the article for free, you're talking to the group for free. But it's a way to, one, connect genuinely with the audience that you're trying to reach. But two, the benefit of that is, they start to hear from you, they become intrigued by you and want to buy your book and see what it's all about. So I think a combination of networking and also exploring opportunities for public speaking, to get on your feet, to start telling the stories that you convey in your book and start connecting with people, I think is very important.
Now, you mentioned about a publisher. So did you go through a publisher for this book?
I did. Went through the American Bar Association as my publisher.
Okay.
And that process was, I was encouraged to put together a book proposal based upon one of the articles I had written on this topic, from somebody who worked with the American Bar Association. And, she kind of walked me through what the guidelines were, what they were looking for in terms of a book proposal. But, wasn't sure whether or not it would stick. But again, it's, about knocking on doors, seeing which ones open. And this one did open for me. It's a topic that a lot of businesses are, whether it's a law firm or whether it's, a number of other industries, are having challenges with the millennial generation, how to connect with them, how to inspire them. And so there was that built-in interest. And for my proposal, I had kind of the contours of the book outlined along with 2 sample chapters. And so, at that point I was committed. I wanted to make this book happen. I'd already put in a number of hours of work to get to that point. But it's, put it in front of them, and it was accepted. And worked with a couple of editors over the course of, it went 9 months from book proposal being accepted to being published. So it was a quick process. But I found the editors to be very helpful. I was somewhat nervous about, you put your heart and your soul on the line when you're writing a book. And mine is part autobiographical, talking about my experiences as a young attorney in Washington, D.C. and in Denver, Colorado, and part research as well. And so you put yourself out there. But I found the editors to be very helpful to bring that fresh perspective and push me to look at things that either I had taken for granted or ideas for further research, further follow-up. And so it worked out very well. They were very helpful to my finished product.
Well, JP, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Another good question. I don't know if I can choose just one favorite book, maybe one from each genre, but I'll stick to my favorite entrepreneurial book. Because that's been a big part of my journey, transitioning from, practicing law, being a litigator, to, starting my own company, writing my own book. And during my first year after I stopped practicing law, I read about a book a week on all different kinds of entrepreneurs, all different kinds of businesses, their journeys. And the two that really connected with me were Blake Makowski's Start Something That Matters. He's the founder of Tom's Shoes. And Tony Hsieh's Delivering Happiness. And both of those books spoke to me because it opened my eyes to the fact that I could once again become the creator, become the author of my own life. I think a lot of us, myself included, get stuck in a rut where we think, we hope that someone notices us. We hope that we're discovered. We hope that, our situation will change. And both of these books really highlighted to me that we don't have to be, the passive observers of our lives. We can start creating something that is meaningful, something that inspires us. And it's frightening to do so at times because, that's the safety net isn't always as strong as you'd like it to be. But the notion of being able to, take control of your life, create a vision that you're inspired by, was something that I connected deeply with, and that really pushed me out of my comfort zone. To, one, I started a children's apparel company with my wife, and now also advising law firms on millennials and writing my first book. It's been a great journey. It's been trial and error. It's been, true steps and false steps. But the journey of, pushing myself, getting out of my comfort zone, and really taking ownership for the direction of my life has been something that I've appreciated, and that those two books really inspired me to take those first steps.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
So my favorite quote, I have a book of quotes that I collect. So this is a good one, a good question. My favorite is probably comes from Teddy Roosevelt, and it is, "Far better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in a great twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat." And that quote really speaks to me. It spoke to me strongly as I was transitioning from, my life as a lawyer to my life as an entrepreneur, consultant, author, that I knew there was a chance that I wouldn't be able to make this work. That the safe route would have been keeping my head down, continuing with my legal career. But there was something inside of me that really wanted more. And, I didn't want to be, the person that Teddy Roosevelt talked about the person who neither enjoys much nor suffers much. And so the journey, to me is worthwhile, even though, we may not always succeed, but it's the journey itself that pushes us and gives us the feeling that we are connected genuinely to others and living a life that connects genuinely to ourselves. And so that's a quote that, when I need a little bit of courage, I sometimes go back and reread and, realize that, failure is not the worst thing in the world. It's something that we're all going to have to deal with at various points. But having the courage to move forward, I think, is incredibly important and something that I try to remind myself.
Well, that reminds me of Hemingway's quote, too, talking about it's not about the destination, but it's all about the journey. So I couldn't agree more with you about that one.
Yep, I love that one.
Well, JP, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
The best way is through my website. It's JP Box Jr., JPBOXJR.com. And all my contact information is there.
Well, JP, I want to thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.